This is RFD Today, a daily look at the key topics impacting rural Illinois. If you live in Illinois, we examine the issues impacting you, your income, and your community. Here's your host for today's program, Bill Shonky.
Hey, good Thursday to you, Illinois. Thanks for joining us for this adventure in broadcasting on the 11th of April. Glad to have you with us. I was out yesterday. Thanks, as always, to Rita for being available. I was at Western Illinois University yesterday, and I was talking to a couple of classes while there, but also while on campus, got to visit with Dr. Mark Bernards, talking weed management and what to do this time of year, especially if you didn't get much work done in the fall or over. We still have winter annuals to deal with, and also we'll talk about some of the research that they've been doing at Western as well. But talking about planting season, and unfortunately I have to talk a lot about weed management season this go around. Saw some field work, saw a little bit of field work on the way to Macomb and on the way back. Not a whole lot, and boy, the way the winds are going to blow today may not be a good day to be turning ground over. But we'll talk to Mark Bernards later in the program. First, though, we'll visit with Kyle Butts, founder of Spray Analytics. And he does a lot of work looking at droplets, and we will talk about his work, and because especially when we talk about dicamba, we need to make sure that everything stays in place. So we'll talk to Kyle in just a couple of minutes. By the way, also we're looking at what's been going on to the north and west of us. Dupree, South Dakota, in 24 hours had 18 inches of snow. Mud Butte, South Dakota, had 18 inches of snow. As an aside, I don't know when the founding fathers and the good folks of South Dakota decided to name their town Mud Butte, but I would like to know what the other choices were. Clark, South Dakota, 17.7. Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, that's close to the Twin Cities, 9.5. Lakeville, Minnesota, 9.8. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 4.5 inches. You know, that's right along the start of the Mississippi River, and eventually that will continue to make its way down our way, and we'll see what kind of impact that has on river levels as we move along. Southwest Minnesota could get 2 feet of snow by Friday. So we'll get some wind, but thankfully we didn't get some of that bomb cyclone going around a second time in parts of the Midwest. Anyway, we'll be back. We have a quick break to get to, then Kyle Butts of Spray Analytics. But first, Rita has this with folks at Pioneer.
Back with Pat Ray, Pioneer field agronomist, covering a very important area of the state, Bloomington, over to Champaign, along I-74. You talked with us earlier in the week, Pat, about nitrogen rates for farmers. Anything else on that topic before we talk about a few others?
So regarding nitrogen rate, we talked about how difficult it was. The good thing is there's lots of tools that we have available to us. Some of the tools are we can take soil nitrate tests in the spring. We can do stock nitrate tests in the fall after black layer. There's all kinds of remote sensing tools available. We got drones today. We can fly manned aircraft and take pictures from there. We've got satellite imagery readily available. One that I use is our Encirca Crop Health, which really does a nice job of showing us those areas of the field that have stresses and maybe need more nitrogen. There's also nitrogen models. There's the N-rate calculator put out by the Midwest universities that focus in on that nitrogen rate question. It's a great starting point. Some of the nitrogen models take it to the next level to identify, based on rainfall and based on the weather and how good the crop is growing, just how much nitrogen we're going to need. So I like the Encirca Pro package that gives the Encirca Crop Health satellite imagery, helps us calculate that nitrogen rate that we need during the season and if any additional nitrogen is needed that season.
Pat, I've heard from a couple of your Pioneer partners this year, made some terrific points. The commodity price for corn is not great for 19, but if you can boost those yields by a few at harvest time, that sort of helps.
Absolutely. Getting the right seed in the ground on the right acre is the first place we start, and then followed up by getting the right nitrogen rate on is certainly important, as well as the right form, time, and placement, followed by getting potassium and phosphorus and your pH in order, and then controlling all the pests out there, the diseases that pop up every year, whether it's gray leaf spot or northern, and some of the other pests, the insect pests we deal with. We've got traits to deal with many of those. Lots of options out there, lots of decisions for farmers to make. and really taking a look at how those products and inputs are working on your farm is really the best approach to getting it right each year.
Let me ask you one more question. As far as how much field work you think might get done here in this mid part of April 2019, as you mentioned, there's a lot of questions on what to start first. Is all your seed delivered to your customers?
Yeah, we are definitely making some great headway there. Supply is in really good shape overall, considering the season we had last year on the seed production side. And so our seed reps are out there. The Pioneer seed reps are moving seed as we speak and treating seed yet on soybeans. If you don't have soybeans treated, this would be a great year to definitely put some fungicide, insecticide, seed treatment on your soybeans, and we can still get that done yet. So I would definitely be looking at those things for the spring. With as wet as it's been, it's a good setting for disease on soybean seedlings especially.
Pioneer Field agronomist Pat Ray here on the RFD Radio Network.
All right, welcome back to RFD today on a Thursday. I'm DeLoss Yonke, and we're joined in studio by the founder of Spray Analytics. Kyle Butts is in studio. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Pretty good. You're founder, you're a one-man band. How long have you been self-employed like this?
So totally self-employed about 3 years. About 5 years ago, my wife and I, she's a co-founder actually,
okay.
Evelyn Butts. We kind of bought some instrumentation and we started going out and doing spray work. And we kind of started in any industry that does any sort of sprays, and we've weaseled our way into the ag business a little bit.
Okay, I just thought of this question then, because you've been saying like you're the only guy that does this sort of stuff. How did you even find the instrumentation to do this stuff if not many others or if nobody else is doing it?
Right. So prior to going out on my own, I actually worked for the company that makes the instrumentation that's used to test droplet size. So it can be any spray, can be a pharmaceutical all the way to an ag spray that we're looking at and talking about today a little bit more. So I was kind of the technical specialist that would go around for this company and tell people how to test their droplets, how to measure their droplets, what the data actually means that comes out of it, and kind of work on an application side. So as I got into that, over time, an instrument became available on the used market, so my wife and I scooped it up, and we started Spray Analytics, and ever since then, we've gotten another instrument. You can travel around with the system. You can send us samples here, and we can go ahead and measure them for you and try to tell you what's going on with your spray.
Wow. They can send samples?
Yeah, if it's more of a personal care product or any sort of aerosol, we'll do those in-house. Other things, we'll go out and actually test them at a customer's facility, and then we've partnered with University of Dayton because a lot of the stuff in the ag world is done in a wind tunnel, actually. So to do the wind tunnel testing, University of Dayton has a wind tunnel. Wind tunnels are very expensive, so I didn't want to build my own, so I partnered with them. I have instrumentation. They have a wind tunnel, and it works out pretty well.
Wind tunnel doesn't fit in the basement, I'm guessing.
Not quite.
Probably
you kind of need about a gymnasium size room
that sounds
to get a
more
full
like
wind
it.
tunnel.
So I'm thinking, first of all, I'm thinking about this from a pharmaceutical standpoint. I mean, other than nasal spray, is there anything else that you would have been testing there?
Yep, I have tested nebulizers, basically anything that's inhaled. So you look at nebulizers, dry powder inhalers, something like Advair, something along those lines, that needs to get tested. Nasal sprays and inhalers, obviously. And that's all about getting the product to the therapeutic zone. So if I have a lung problem, I need to get that chemical down into my lung in order for it to work. No different than from a farmer's standpoint when he's going out and spraying it with a tractor. The idea is to get that chemical down on the field that he aimed it at. So that's really what we're looking at doing.
So is it the droplet size or just its availability its opportunity to move down the passageways it needed to move?
From a pharmaceutical standpoint, it's kind of both. So they look at things that are droplets or particles that are smaller than 10 microns is considered what can be respirable. So that will get down into your bronchial tube and in your lung area and able to deposit there and actually get into the bloodstream that way and provide the relief that you're looking for.
Wow. What about something like in the house, whether that's bug spray or something that's, like a freshener, an air freshener of some sort? Then, I'm sure you're studying those kind of things too then.
Yep, absolutely. So air fresheners is a great one. Every bathroom that you go into now in a public place seems to have those kind of automatic air fresheners. Interesting thing about those is when they spray out, you want them to be, you want the droplets that come out to be big enough so that they're not inhaled. They don't make you sick or anything like that. But you also want them small enough so that they disperse in the air and they don't just fall onto the ground. Early models of those used to fall on the ground, and over the course of 2 or 3 months, you'd get a stain on your floor.
Really?
They've adjusted those. They've made different valves and different actuation methods such that they work a lot better. But the early ones of those, over the course of 3 to 6 months, all of a sudden you'd get a little stain on your floor right underneath it.
Just because bubbles would literally burst from several feet away. Exactly.
Well, more or less, large droplets would just fall. So they'd come out of the orifice, they'd come out of the little spray can, and they just fall onto the ground instead of dispersing through the air where they can actually do the work they want them.
It's interesting from that standpoint, then, because we're going to talk about this from an ag standpoint. But you're a droplets guy. I mean, in this case, this is, as a third party, we just want to know about the droplets. I don't know any one of these companies, or I don't know anything about agriculture, but, I know the droplets. So how do we keep them from moving very much?
Exactly. So one interesting thing about the ag world is that when we talk about what's a driftable particle in ag, a lot of times we're talking about something under about 140 microns or 105 microns. Different people will use different metrics there. But 105 and 140 micron droplet is actually quite large in other spray applications. So it's kind of interesting, kind of seeing different industries look at different metrics.
It's one thing in a house or an office space or a bathroom. It's another thing in a 40-acre field. Yeah. So, hey, we're up against the break. We'll continue this conversation in just a moment on RFD today.
Farm Week and FarmWeekNow.com journalist Dina Stroish connects rural routes for you. From the Farm Bill to crop insurance to GMO labeling, her expertise is apparent in the stories she reports. Here's a bit about her rural roots.
I get to meet interesting people and share their stories, and I get paid to do it. I cover ag policy and really enjoy keeping the farming community updated on these important issues.
Be it routes or roots, RFD Radio, FarmWeekNow.com, and Farm Week keep you connected.
Does the warmer weather have you itching for a weekend getaway? Take your Illinois Farm Bureau membership savings with you.
Farm Bureau members can save up to 20% at choice hotels, including favorites like Comfort Suites, Sleep Inn, Quality Inn and Suites, with even more to choose from.
Call 800-258-2847 or visit the Choice Hotels website to search all the hotels at once and to make advance reservations.
Contact your local County Farm Bureau for your discount code number.
You're going to need me. You're going to need us.
All of us.
You're going to need our technical skills,
our math, our engineering skills.
You're going to need our help with your water, your air, your food.
You're going to need our organizational skills, our problem-solving skills.
You're going to need our determination, our honesty, our compassion.
You're going to need the next generation of leaders to face the challenges the future will bring.
And we promise we'll be there when you need us.
Today, 4-H is growing the next generation of leaders. Support us at 4h.org.
Okay, men. This is your time. Maybe you didn't choose this, but you're here now. You're going to go out there and be an all-star caregiver. It's up to you. So what are you going to do? You're going to go grocery shopping, cook, clean, be there emotionally and physically. You got to dig deeper. Drive them to physical therapy, doctor's appointments. Don't you forget about the pharmacy. No, you won't. Because that's what caregivers do. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. This is your time to show the world, your family, and yourself that you're tougher than tough. Now go out there and be the best caregiver this world has ever seen. Caregiving is tougher than tough. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
All right, welcome back to RFD Today. I'm DeLoss Yankee. We're talking to Kyle Butts, and he is co-founder, and his wife, co-founder of Spray Analytics. So let's bring this to an agricultural discussion. To say we need to lower the complaints, which is true, but that's kind of missing the point. But drift reduction, how do we do drift reduction? So what has been some of your role in that?
Right. So some of the research that's going on kind of behind the scenes to most end users is the amount of testing that goes into everything that ends up on the label and things like that with dicamba is pretty intense. So when I mentioned earlier about working with a wind tunnel down in Dayton, what's actually looked at is anything that's being tank mixed with dicamba goes through a testing to ensure that the droplet size coming out isn't decreased greatly by whatever you're adding, if it's an adjuvant, if it's a nutrient, whatever it is, to make sure that we're not kind of changing that droplet size coming out. What we do with that droplet size is actually it's put into kind of a mathematical model that says this is where it's going to end up given these weather conditions. So when you look at the label and it says don't drive over 15 miles an hour, the pressure should be this, the tip should be this, all of those items have all been tested more or less in kind of this wind tunnel scenario that helps us try to limit drift. So the stuff on the label should really be followed as close as possible to ensure that we're putting the droplets out there that we don't believe will drift at all. So
that wasn't just guys in a room in D.C., saying, okay, let's do this. This has been done over and over again from a scientific basis. Exactly. For probably the last 25 to 30 years, about 25, 30 years ago, there was something called the Spray Drift Task Force. That was put together by different nozzle manufacturers, chemical companies, and everybody else. And they kind of got together and they kind of said, how are we going to control spray drift? So this research has been ongoing, and dicamba has really spiked the amount of interest in the research, obviously, because the potency of dicamba has presented with a lot of complaints. Wow. If I said, well, what if we just made the droplets bigger so they don't float so much? That sounds like that may have unintended consequences, though. Right. So the issue with that is we can make droplets as big as we want. Obviously, we could just put a sprinkler out there, basically, and flood everything if we really felt like it. The idea is we want to balance the risk of drift with the efficacy that we're getting out. So what I mean by that is when we're talking about spraying, we're generally talking about covering or coverage of an area. So the better we can atomize or make the droplets small, the better coverage we end up getting. So the real idea here is kind of a Goldilocks game where we want it to be big enough to stay on the field that we're intending, but small enough to cover as much of that field as possible and do it uniformly so that we get that weed control that we're looking for. Wow. The Goldilocks, that's a pretty good way to consider it. Most spray... This droplet is too big. This droplet is too small. This one is just right. Most spray applications do end up in some sort of a Goldilocks situation where you want it to be big enough to be safe, but small enough to be effective. And then others come along and say, well, okay, now what if we added something to the nozzles, or what if we had a piece of technology that could somehow reduce that kind of drift? Yeah, exactly. So there's multiple ways to look at the problem. The most common ones are looking at the spray tip itself, as well as the chemistry, whatever you're tank mixing together. But there are other exterior factors involved. If you kind of impact the turbulence around the nozzle, you can put a shield on it. You can change the temperature of the liquid that might be being sprayed. And you can kind of have this impact that if everything works together, ideally we can limit that drift and end up kind of eradicating most drift complaints. If we can ever get rid of all drift complaints, I'm not really sure if that's likely necessarily, but we can definitely limit the impact. And that starts with kind of being a good steward and really following the label and making sure that we're taking accountability, which can be difficult because, from a usability standpoint, I can talk about research all I want, but when you need to go out and spray a field and the weather conditions are, maybe not perfect, it can be a difficult game to play for sure. Well, to fit into all these windows, especially with the hour after sunrise and 2 hours before sundown, plus wind speeds, plus temperature inversions, we've already limited that window quite a bit. And when we're talking about shields, though, then we also, that's something else we have to add, so it has to be able to get up and down the field and still be there and not shield so much that it doesn't allow what it was supposed to do in the first place.
Right, exactly. So some of those shield products or things along those lines, the usability of them is sometimes a hindrance as far as actually getting them on. That's where I've worked with one guy up in Wisconsin, KB Agritech, who makes a Pattern Master. They have a small shield. It's kind of a spoiler that goes in front of the nozzle. Your boom can fold, everything like that. So it's not completely inefficient, I guess, to use it, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Whereas some other shields, when you're installing them, taking them off, and all that kind of thing, they can be pretty inefficient.
Right. Yeah, especially if if you're a custom person who has to go from field to field to field. We don't need to add, too much time with anything else.
Exactly. The ideal setup is you roll off and you start spraying as quickly as possible.
Wow. Well, this is fascinating stuff, and but yeah, like I mentioned, we want to get the complaints down, but we have to get the complaints down. But more big picture, we need to, just do what the label says, and do whatever we can just to minimize movement. Yeah,
to me at this point, it starts with kind of following that label as well as possible, documenting everything that we're doing as we're doing it to make sure that we are covered from that standpoint. Because if we have drift issues or anything like that, we want to make sure that whoever's doing the spraying is doing it properly and it's documented, and we can go back and review that to see what's actually happening here. And from a research standpoint, we can take that information back and say, what other tools do we have at our disposal that we can start implementing?
Very cool. That went awfully fast. Kyle Betts, stay tuned. More to come on RFD Today.
More farm news and information ahead. Stay tuned for more RFD Today here on the Illinois Farm Bureau Radio Network.
Clean water matters to all of us. For years, farmers have been calling for clean water and clear rules because we know it's possible to have both. Now is the time to make your voice heard. Text WATERS to 52886 and support the new clean water rule proposed by the EPA and Army Corps. Don't wait. The 60-day comment period has begun, so text WATERS to 52886. Contact your local county farm bureau for more information on clean water and clear rules.
Attention corn farmers. Your corn checkoff dollars are working with the U.S. Meat Export Federation to grow red meat export volumes. Because when we're exporting beef, we're also exporting corn. The beef industry consumes 28% of all corn fed to livestock, plus additional corn in the form of DDGs, a co-product of ethanol production. Now that's what we call working an angle. Your checkoff is working corn from all angles. Because of the Illinois Corn Marketing Board, your profitability is our bottom line. A message from the Illinois Corn Checkoff.
As you prepare for planting season, remember your neighbors. Whether you're an applicator, grower, or beekeeper, use FieldWatch to register your farm and monitor for sensitive sites around you. FieldWatch is a free, easy-to-use online mapping tool. Consulting FieldWatch is now a requirement for the over-the-top use dicamba products. Communicating with your neighbors will help you protect your farm and the environment. Don't wait. Go online to fieldwatch.com. Growing agriculture, we grow best together.
It's where your home is built, your landscape is planted, and your children play. Land is all around us, so Illinois farmers have dedicated years to learning how to best care for it. Today, we're bridging modern knowledge with resources from Mother Nature to promote natural soil activity and choosing crops that enhance soil health. To learn more about conservation efforts, visit ilfarmersconserve.com. Preserving our water, protecting our land, providing our food.
This message brought to you by Illinois Farm Bureau.
Hello, I'm Trooper Teal with the Illinois State Police. April is Distracted Driving Awareness Month. According to the most recent report from the National Highway Safety Administration, 394,450 people were either injured or killed in distracted driving related incidents. Avoid distractions while driving, such as talking on your cell phone, texting, eating, and even adjusting the radio. Wear your seatbelt and remember to just drive.
A message from the Illinois Farm Bureau and the Illinois State Police.
All ag.
All Illinois.
All now.
There are a lot of smartphone apps out there, but do they have what's important to us here in Illinois? The Farm Week Now app does, and it's always at your fingertips. All ag, all Illinois, and 24/7 where and when you need it for free. Go to your app or Play Store on your smartphone, hit search, type in Farm Week Now, that's one word, and download it today. Brought to you by Illinois Farm Bureau, where we're all about farm, family, and food. Visiting with Dr. Mark Bernards. It's become our biannual conversation. We seem to be on campus at planting season and at harvest, and we can talk about weeds and weed management in both times, certainly. One thing coming out here, and we were talking about this before, just kept waiting for everything to turn purple. Hen bit and, all those winter annuals. And even if we didn't deal with them because, we just didn't have the chance to late last fall, it just doesn't seem to have been as bad as I assumed it was going to be. But what does that necessarily mean for management when we finally get in the fields, hopefully still this month?
Okay, a couple thoughts on that. One is it was a really cold winter. And I know even in my yard where I don't always take good care of my weeds just because I like to have weeds around for teaching purposes, things were much later in greening up this spring. So in fields where you've historically had problems, I would watch over the next couple of weeks. We'll probably start to see purple. The other thing that I think is contributing, there's been a huge push for the use of residual herbicides. The last couple of springs, we've done a very good job of planting early. And so people that used residuals, they took care of burning down those weeds, eliminating some of the seed production. And so I think we've probably, in many fields, driven down some of those populations.
Yeah, 2 years ago, February was like 10 degrees more than average, and so you would expect to see results accordingly. But in 2019, certainly not so much. But that word residual, the word residual and the term modes of action, I mean, those things aren't going out of style anytime soon, are they?
No, from a herbicide resistance management standpoint, we have to think about using multiple modes of action, and we have to think about overlaying those modes of action so that we're always killing the weeds in our field in 2 or 3 different ways. And the news that came out of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign this last winter, where they have a population that's highly resistant to S-metolachlor, or the dual brand of products, and shows elevated resistance to the others in that group 15, should make every person that uses herbicides for weed management in Illinois concerned.
If it is still a couple of weeks before we start to see purple, for example, are we getting to a point then where we're just going to throw it on all 100% post? And how do we handle this in a timely manner as we continue our way into April?
All right. So the goal is to get rid of the weeds before they turn purple. So if you're out in your fields and you see green weeds, now would be a great time to put down burn downs if you can get across without causing serious compaction, just to eliminate seed production for next year. As we talked before, what's your biggest priority? As soon as those soil conditions are appropriate, if I don't have a lot of weed pressure, I probably want to be putting my planter in the ground and getting that seed so I can maximize the length of my growing season. In corn, we have a lot of flexibility with that in terms of coming back with some pretty good residual products that are safe on the crop, and I can do that as an early post, a V2 or a V3. In soybeans, the trend is towards earlier planting, which is good from an agronomic standpoint, but I don't have that same flexibility in herbicides. So if we're my position and I was able to plant both simultaneously, I'm going to focus on weed management in the soybeans first. So I can use those stout pre's that have good residual properties that I can't put on post.
Gotcha. It's different, or how different is it now, considering soybeans? I mean, we could have 2 different planters and go at the same time. So does that impact how we handle the corn? If we're not planting soybeans at Memorial Day, if we were at Memorial Day, that's one thing. But if we're planting them in April, is that a different scenario?
So I think probably the biggest concern is tank contamination. So if I had one sprayer that I could do corn and one that I could do soybeans, that would be ideal. That's not going to be the case. But if you're switching back and forth between corn and soybeans, taking the time to do those triple rinses will be very important.
Triple rinse? I don't have time for a triple rinse this year. What are you talking about, triple rinse?
Triple rinse means cleaning out your tank and your hoses at least 3 times so that you can eliminate as many of the residues that would potentially contaminate the other crop.
That's a
That's best management practice, isn't it?
That is a best management practice. Anybody that saw issues with dicamba tank contamination a couple of years ago, I think would appreciate how just a little bit of a product can have a negative effect.
And hopefully listeners just rolled their eyes when I asked about triple rinse, because that's the way to go about doing it. But from any kind of injury standpoint, though, from corn onto soybeans, if I'm doing weed management in corn while I have either just planted or newly emerging soybeans, any concern about that, beyond tank mix?
Correct. Probably the biggest issue with corn herbicides are going to be your HPPD inhibitors, so your Callistos, your balance products that we use and atrazine will all cause some significant injury on the soybeans. Going the other direction, we use a lot of PPO herbicides in soybeans, your Valors and your Authority type products. And if you have contaminants in there and you're putting on early posts on corn, you're going to cause some significant burning to your corn crop if you've got tank contamination.
Let's take in a short window of time. I think one of the things that I keep reminding myself, it is only April 10, and we can do a lot of this in a hurry, so no need to make mistakes along the way.
Correct. In the classes I teach called Crop Ecology and Management, we look at data that Dr. Nafziger at the U of I and then Dr. Nielsen at Purdue did. And there have been several years where in both of those states, 40 to 50% of the corn crop gets planted in 1 week time period. When the weather's good, we have capacity to plant a lot really quickly. So even though April 10th is the beginning of the optimum window for planting, it's obviously not optimum out there in most fields in terms of soil temperature and soil conditions. And we'd probably do a lot more damage trying to hurry up to get in that optimum window as opposed to waiting towards the end of the optimum time, which is the end of April and the 1st of May.
More to come with Dr. Mark Bernards at Western on RFD today.
Farm Week and FarmWeekNow.com journalist Kay Shipman connects rural routes for you. For 3 decades, Kay has delivered important news. She covers everything from legislative issues to the latest in soil and water conservation. Here's a bit about her rural roots.
I love covering so many aspects of agriculture and providing readers with the facts they need to make better decisions. I also get to work with farmers and meet new people along the way.
Be it routes or roots, RFD Radio, FarmWeekNow.com and Farm Week keep you connected.
Warmer weather means a longer honeydew list. Your county farm bureau can help you stay on top of your project list and save you money along the way. A Farm Bureau membership offer includes discounts on equipment and supplies from Grainger, plus free shipping on all standard Grainger products. Browse thousands of items from landscaping equipment to power tools. Anything you need to get the job done, Grainger has it. Not a Farm Bureau member? Call us at 309-557-2689. or visit Illinois Farm Bureau online and join today.
Let's check the markets on the RFD Radio Network. I'm DeLoss Yankee. We're a little bit lower for corn. Soybeans are down close to a nickel now. May corn down a fraction, 361.5. July down 0.75 cents, 370. December down 1 1/4, 389.5. May soybeans down 4.5, 897.5. July down 4.5, 910 3/4. November down 4.5, 930. May wheat still up 1.5 pennies, 459.5. July up 2 1/4, 463 3/4. Hog futures have gone back toward limit up. May started the day limit up is now up 275, 89.72. It was limit down Tuesday. It was limit up earlier today. April cattle up 65. June up $1.37, 121.32. DeLoss Yankee, RFD Radio Network. Stoller International is the premier Case IH dealership in central Illinois. Convenient locations in Pontiac, Herscher, Mononk, Streator, and Ottawa. Come see the large selection of farm equipment and parts.
Dr. Mark Bernards at Western Illinois University. We're talking about weed management for 2019 and some classroom work that you've done recently as well that has found some really interesting results.
Okay, so we have a nice little farm here at WIU where we get to do both research that I'm interested in and then student research projects. Last year we were curious about a report that said if you had high nitrogen levels in the soil, it may increase dicamba volatility. So we did a hoop study where we treated flats of soil with nitrogen and without nitrogen, and then sprayed dicamba on both. And then stuck those flats next to sensitive soybeans underneath tents that covered 2 rows to kind of concentrate the vapor, and looked at volatility. And what we found is if we added supplemental nitrogen in the form of urea ammonium nitrate to the surface, we got more volatility, or the dicamba particles drifted further from the source.
How much extra leads to that sort of thing, or were you able to isolate that in one of your thoughts?
So in terms of the quantity of nitrogen, we didn't look at that, but what we saw is from our point source, we had movement that was another 6 to 7 feet beyond what we did where we didn't have the supplemental nitrogen. And this ties back into when we do post applications of dicamba on soybeans, there's a restriction against using ammonium sulfate. The reason for that restriction is ammonium sulfate increases the volatility of the dicamba molecule. And what our study just demonstrated is if you have a lot of free ammonia on your soil surface from whatever reason, that may increase dicamba volatility.
So if I'm doing a rotation, hopefully I had 250 corn, or who knows, even more. But one of the questions is, okay, now how much did I pull from the ground? I mean, what do I have left after I built a crop like that? So then how much, do I come back on? I certainly, with inputs, we want to make sure we're taking care of every dollar here, but how much do I put back on to grow soybeans, especially in a case like that? I mean, we don't want extra anyway.
Correct.
We don't want to run off or anything like that, but that would be for an interesting question where we're probably not gauging as closely.
Correct. And in a situation like this year, even if I poured a lot of nitrogen on the corn, we've had so much rain, any of that excess would have moved down deeper into the soil. But from a nitrogen on soybeans perspective, I've done several studies where I've put nitrogen on, and I've looked at others from other schools, and there's rarely a benefit from putting any nitrogen on soybean. What we tend to do is to slow down the productivity of the rhizobia that are fixing the nitrogen for the crop by doing that. My one exception that I've seen is we did a study last year where we looked at planting green. So we planted soybeans into a green cereal rye cover crop and then terminated it afterwards. In that particular study, we saw a benefit from putting some nitrogen on at the time of planting. The beans responded with better yields. But it's a very narrow example of where we would probably use nitrogen.
Then another case, and it also goes back to what we're talking about and fitting everything in the time window, but the difference between using a product early and using a rescue attempt instead.
Yeah, so we've had the dicamba system for 2 years now where we could legally apply dicamba. My perspective is it's very easy with that system to shift back to what we did when we first had Roundup, where we come in with a shot of Roundup dicamba, a shot of Roundup dicamba, and it looks really great. Our risk is with those later applications of dicamba, it's warmer and we're getting more off-target movement. This last summer, we looked at a study where we looked at dicamba with exclusive residuals pre in soybeans, so the Valors and the Authorities where we can't apply those post. And then we looked at them with products where we could apply them as an early post-treatment, so your Flex Stars and some of those. And what we found in both cases, adding that dicamba early significantly improved our season-long water hemp control. Cocklebur is a major problem weed on our farm. It had a big impact on cocklebur. The dicamba didn't give us any benefit on giant foxtail, which we expected, and the benefit was marginal on morning glory. But I feel very strongly from that we really need to think about using that dicamba early on with products that have residual properties. I think it has some characteristics where it enhances the residual properties of those other herbicides.
And just the sound of cocklebur makes my fingers and my ankles hurt from some of those memories. But season-long control, that's a key term. We're not just talking about 4 to 6 weeks here. I mean, season-long should be the goal anyway. If we can do anything that could lead toward that without hurting the crop, that sounds pretty good.
Correct. And what we're doing is we're playing smart biology. If I'm using that dicamba up front, and I'm extending that residual window by a week or two, then my crop is canopied and the crop is doing the work for me. The last thing I want to be doing is relying on that chemistry to control the weeds all year. My goal has got to be to protect the crop until it can canopy and then let the crop do the work.
You think in the classroom and in the fields with you, you have maybe the next plant breeders or the next weed scientists that, there's been a pretty good tree that's come out of Western 40-some years. So hopefully you have the next crop for the next generation ready to go.
I'm certainly hopeful. We've got some really great students at Western. I love the fact that they're down to earth. And it's been exciting for me as someone who loves research. Over the last couple of years, I've sent 5 or 6 students on to grad schools, and I think they're doing great things. Look for many more in the future.
That's one of the things, though. This could be 6 to 10 years of school. So if your kid wants to be a weed scientist, this may take a while.
Correct. To be a weed scientist, you're going to be a minimum of 6 years and probably 9 or 10, depending on if you pursue just a master's or a PhD.
Gotcha. Get those loans ready, yeah. Mark, thanks so much. Good to see you.
Thank you, DeLoss. It's always great to visit with you.
Dr. Mark Bernards at Western Illinois University. Glad to visit with him yesterday. Kyle Butt's still in studio here, founder of Spray Analytics. One thing we've been talking about, it's one thing for you to do all the research on droplet sizes and where everything goes, but if I'm not incorporating that sort of thing on the farm level, then we've missed something in there, like nozzles and tips and all those things. So not just label what's on the label, but also all the equipment, all that is key.
Yeah, exactly. We've really got to make sure that everything is done properly so that the research is actually paying dividends in the long run. And that really comes down to the individual users being able to get the right training, the right information, and put it in practice, and then we can see what actually is happening out there in the field and make sure that we are limiting it as much as possible. We think from a research perspective we're doing a really good job of that, but ultimately what happens in the field is all that really is going to be the end result and the outcome.
The properties of a chemical and properties of water could be quite different as well. So how much do we have to understand water in this? So
in all the testing that we'll ever do, we'll always run a lot of testing on water itself, and then as we add in, say, dicamba or any sort of adjuvant or anything like that, the properties of that fluid do change, and that will impact what the droplet size that comes out is. So we'll do testing on water, and then the dicamba, and then whatever you're adding to it, and we're looking at how each one of these impacts the result coming out of that spray tip.
Fascinating stuff. Remember, always read and follow label directions, and we'll be talking about this more. We'll talk to Lindsay Ramsey about this pretty soon as well with Illinois Farm Bureau. Jill Johnson, Illinois Beef, is up next on RFD today. Let's check livestock markets on the RFD Radio Network. I'm DeLoss Yankee. Tuesday was Packer Day at Fairview Sale Barn. They had steers and heifers mostly steady with the week before. Choice 2 to 4s from 129 to 131. Some high-yielding steers and heifers made it to a top of 134.5. Mixed selected choice 125 to 127. Slaughter cows high yieldings had a top of 112 on an average. Premiums from 84 to 90. Young cows returning to the farm for feed brought a top of $105 a hundredweight. Illinois direct hog market has held firm this week, $46 to $56 a hundredweight. Sow market has also held pretty firm, $36 to $45 for lightweights, $42 to $49 for heavyweights. Light boars at the top of $28. DeLoss Yankee, RFD Radio Network.
How do people benefit from raising livestock here in Illinois? Rich Giebert, Illinois farmer, president of the Illinois Farm Bureau.
Well, growing up on a livestock farm was always interesting, and I enjoy it more today than I did back then. But it did give me the opportunity to have a good work ethic, learn to get up in the morning. And you know, that was difficult during my senior days at high school and college days. I had a tendency not to go to bed at a respectable hour. But no, it was always enjoyable on the farm and getting up before daybreak and milking the cows and getting the chores done and then go about the rest of the day's business.
Illinois Farm Bureau, along with beef, corn, milk, pork, and soybean associations, make up the Livestock Development Group, supporting the Illinois livestock sector. For more information, check out IllinoisLivestock.org.
All right, welcome back to RFD Today, our final segment on a Thursday. We bring in Jill Johnson down at Illinois Beef Association. Jill, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Hey, I too am well, thank you. You were in D.C. recently, weren't you?
Yeah, I've been in D.C. a couple of times this spring, so it's been good.
Yeah, once, I assume, with the Ag Leadership class.
With the Ag Leadership class, yep. I'm part of the Illinois Ag Leadership Foundation class of 2020. So we were in D.C. as a group, and then I guess it was
the next
week?
Was it
just last week? Yeah, it was last week. The IBA, our policy division, was in D.C. for the beef industry's fly-in. So. Yeah.
Talking about trade.
And it was nice out there. The cherry blossoms were blooming, so that makes it even more fun.
Yeah, I was just talking about that earlier in the week, about how nice it was, and thousands of people were there, and you were there to talk about trade. Hopefully, just continue to get that message across.
Our conversation surrounded trade quite a bit.
What kind of feeling did you get? I mean, are people all in agreement of, yes, we need, especially like USMCA, we need to get these deals done, or, any kind of hurdles that you came across by chance?
Right. So just last week, with the beef industry being in D.C. and Illinois beef leaders out there, we focused quite a bit on USMCA. That is absolutely our biggest ask. To get that ratified, and no matter who we talked to, everybody was pretty much in agreement that they understand the importance of trade to the ag industry. Our delegation understands that agriculture is the state's top industry, and so therefore a top priority. There are still some unknowns with USMCA, but we're hoping that we'll see some movement on that this summer. And I think what it really takes is, and this is not something that you haven't heard before, but people have got to reach out to their legislators and let them know how important this is. And most people that we talked to knew USMCA. They'd heard about it. They understood that we felt it was important and are supportive of trade, but reiterating that we need to resolve tariff disputes. We need to restore trade agreements. We need to ratify USMCA as quickly as possible. And so that was what we were repeating over and over, and they definitely heard the message.
Yeah. Did you talk at all about labeling? We
did.
Yeah. So
Yep.
I'll take a steak, any day of the week, obviously, and so we can compete against anything because beef is awesome. But if they start putting words like clean on the label, I would imagine that's when that was really when things would get riled up.
Right. So we talked about labeling. We talked about lab cultured meat quite a bit, but that was a point where some were surprised to hear about that and wanted more information on the topic. But bottom line, we talked about labeling and how that can create confusion anytime you walk into a grocery store, and that certainly was understood as well. But the importance there of making sure that things are labeled correctly and that we're on a level playing field, and that it comes down to food safety as well. So our product as beef is obviously highly inspected and highly regulated, and we would want to make sure that the same goes for alternative proteins, and that seemed to be understood. We also talked about climate change quite a bit and beef's impact on the environment and how farmers are conservationists every day. And of course, we're approaching Earth Day, so it's a perfect time to talk about that. And what was refreshing was we're sitting in these offices and we're talking about how we're producing the same amount of beef with 33% less cattle than what we were 30 years ago, and helping them understand the impact and how farmers are committed to being part of the solution and are the ones that care about the environment. You could say more than anyone because they're there every day, and we heard statements saying, well, this needs to be based in science. These decisions need to be based in science. So that was really refreshing to hear that people understand that there is science behind this. this and to pay attention to the science and not claims that are meant to strike fear.
Right. Hey, so here we are on April 11, which means, wow, 2 months from now, you guys will be down in Effingham, won't you?
Yeah, that's right. Summer conference. June 11th through the 13th.
Is registration already open for that?
It's not open. We're actually working on finalizing the details this week, and then we're going to release the schedule and open registration. But for those that have been to summer conference in the past, similar format, but we're going to have a reception, a president's reception that Tuesday evening on June 11th, and time to socialize and network with fellow cattlemen. And then that Wednesday will be our educational day, our Cattlemen's College, along with our annual meeting and our awards dinner. And then that Thursday, the 13th, is tour day.
Oh,
and we're excited about our awards dinner. We have picked our award winners, so IBA recognizes 5 top producers each year in a different category, and so we've picked our award winners, and we're working with them on some stories and videos, and so we're really excited to have that awards dinner and recognize some of our top producers in the state.
Yeah, great way to celebrate the industry. Hey, we're already out of time, Jill. You can always keep updated about events.
It always flies by, DeLoss.
I know, it does. It's a fast 6 minutes. But you can keep updated on things at IllinoisBeef.com. Also, look at Illinois Beef Association on Facebook as well. Jill, thanks so much.
You bet. Thank you.
Jill Johnson at Illinois Beef. I'm DeLoss Yankee saying watch your ends. We'll be back in studio again on Friday.
More farm news and information ahead. Stay tuned for more RFD Today here on the Illinois Farm Bureau Radio Network.